I'd like to call to order the July 13th meeting of the Clive City Council. Will the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Klein.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Judkins.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
McElhaney.
Here.
Thank you.
All accounted for. If you'd rise and join us in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have approval of the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes.
Approval.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the agenda. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The agenda is approved. Next, we have the citizens presentation. This is the opportunity for anyone to approach the council on an item that is not on the agenda. And while Pete checks to see if there's anyone online, let me just remind everyone of our operating principles. Clive supports the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And in conducting our work, we expect that everyone will act according to those principles. Do we have anyone online?
We do, Your Honor. For those participating using the Zoom app, you can participate by using the raise hand function. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's the reactions emoji. Click on that and then use the raise hand function.
And while we do that, is there anyone in the chamber who wishes to address the council on an item not on the agenda? You know one coming forward? Anyone online?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Then we'll move to consent.
Move resolution.
I think that was Ted and then a second by Eric. Very good. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Matthew, I'm a yes.
Thank you. So consent, drum roll, passes by a vote of 5-0. Next up, we have a great part of the evening where we swear in our new police officers. Chief.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I think I've mentioned before, this is my favorite part of the job, to be able to introduce and swear in new law enforcement officers for the future of the city of Clive. Tonight, we're swearing in 3 new police officers, and they come from a wide variety of backgrounds. That's what we like to see, a lot of different kinds of people, because we police a lot of different kinds of people. Tonight, we're going to be swearing in Andrew Faulkner. He graduated from Urbandale High School, attended DMAC, got a BA in psychology and criminal justice from Iowa State University. He was a Polk County detention officer at the beginning of his career back in 2016. But he wanted to be a law enforcement officer, and at that time joined the Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department and was there for about 4 years. There he met and married a fellow Albuquerque police officer, Elise, and they've been working to get back to the Des Moines metro area. We're very happy to have Andrew here, and Elise joined the Johnston Police Department right next door. Next, we have Dalton Towns. Dalton graduated from Johnston High School in 2018 and went from there into the United States Army, where he served a 4-year enlistment. He graduated from the Expert Infantryman's course in 2020 and Non-Commissioned Officers Academy in 22. He left the Army with the rank of Sergeant E5, and Dalton is from a law enforcement family. Our third one is Abby Bays. She is a 2019 graduate, high school graduate from Carroll, Iowa. And then she's a 2022 graduate from Iowa State University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology. She was active in the criminal justice club there and a peer mentor for incoming freshmen. And while at the ISU, she worked as a campus safety ambassador for the ISU PD, and she came highly recommended from the Iowa State University Police Department. So with that, Your Honor, if you're ready to swear them in, we'll have them come up, and then after that, have their badges pinned on them. So you guys want to come on up? We're gonna go right across here, kind of facing over that side, put the mayor over here.
After I say the word I, say your name. Follow me from there. All right? You'd raise your right hand. I
Dalton Towns,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all the duties of the office of police officer
discharge all the duties of the office of police officer
for the city of Clive, Iowa,
for the city of Clive, Iowa,
as now and hereafter required by law.
as now and hereafter required by law.
There's one more phase here. We have the law enforcement oath of honor. So repeat after me. On my honor,
On my honor,
I will never betray my badge,
I will never betray my badge,
my integrity,
my integrity,
my character,
my character,
or the public trust.
or the public trust.
I will always uphold the Constitution,
I will always uphold the Constitution,
my community,
my community,
and the agency
and the agency
I serve.
I serve.
Congratulations.
Next, everyone's got a loved one with them that they've requested that can pin their badge on. So if everybody'd like to come up and pin their badges on and try not to draw any blood.
Always harder than it looks.
There you go.
My prayers.
Ay, ay, ay.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Thanks, folks.
All right, thank you.
Good job, guys.
That's fine. Again, congratulations. Next item, we move into our action items, and the first is a public hearing, which is a continuance. Did we publish the notice?
Yes, Your Honor. Public notice was published in the Des Moines Register on May 15th, 2023, and then the public hearing was continued at our meeting on May 25th, and then again on June 22nd.
Thank you. Amanda?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Matthew, if you wouldn't mind the dot cam. Tonight, we have before you the continued public hearing for the rezoning of the land at Emerald Isle Drive and Northwest 156th Street. Currently, these properties are zoned R1 single family, and the request is to rezone to C4 for commercial use. The C4 zoning is consistent with the city's future land use plan in the comprehensive plan for retail and services for commercial. This corner in the front portion here were rezoned back in 2016. There was an original effort by Come and Go to develop this particular tract that was rezoned. And then they ultimately decided to do the property on the south side of the intersection instead. So we recently approved and is currently under construction, the Iowa Trust and Savings Bank development. And then now we have a developer who has assembled the remaining single family lots and is proposing to rezone that. The initial development concept did conceptualize 2 lots for this area, but with input and feedback that we received from some of the public, that was rearranged a little bit to create 3 lots instead. That way the car wash would not be directly against the bank. The applicant has provided sound study overlay as well for the 3 lots. And I did indicate on here, because you did see this similar study previously for the 2-lot consideration, the building has turned. So this X aligns with this point on this, and this X aligns with this point on this, because the building orientation is back to what the developer's original proposal was. In the 2-lot concept, they had flipped the building to try to alleviate some of the neighboring property concerns. So with that, staff has got quite a bit of feedback. There's a protest petition filed on this particular rezoning request that was signed by the Iowa Trust and Savings Bank owner and the developer of the Emerald Isle Townhomes that is located just right here off of the concept map. And I believe both of those parties are represented here tonight and would probably like to make comment. So with that, staff would just point out this is a rezoning consideration that we feel is primarily a land use conversation. And some of the concerns that have been raised are site plan specific items such as lighting, noise, landscaping. I know there is some request from the adjacent property owners to include some additional requirements in the zoning change and development agreement, including restriction of the uses to the C3 office park designation, as well as some additional landscaping and buffering requirements. Staff doesn't feel that those are necessary or appropriate at this time. The landscaping items primarily have been raised as a concern for the car wash property, which is now not adjacent to the other lot. And the restriction on the uses just isn't consistent with the city's future land use plan. We also have concerns at the staff level about kind of that contraction we've seen in office use and needs. And we do just over a half a mile west from here have an office park with similarly sized lots that is 2/3 undeveloped still after nearly 2 decades. So we don't think that that's likely to be very successful in restricting these uses to office only. So with that, there is also a zoning change and development agreement. It does stipulate the typical 50-foot landscape buffer requirement from the neighboring residential property, which would be this location. It also then lays out the requirements for the Emerald Isle Drive improvements, which are to be made all prior to the businesses really becoming operational, to be completed, I believe it was October of 2024. And how that is structured is that the city would undertake the design, bid, and construction process, and the applicant would then reimburse the city for their portion of that cost for their obligation as each of the lots would develop. So each lot would pay essentially 1/3 of that cost at the time that they had a permit issued or were requesting certificate of occupancy, depending on the timing of when those improvements are completed. So with that, staff does recommend approval as the land use request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and previous city actions related to this intersection and area. And I would open it up to any questions and turn it over to the applicant.
Questions for Amanda? Yes, Michael.
You had mentioned something about office buildings or office suites. Could you go back to that and maybe just repeat that for me? I think you said you somewhat ruled those out because of within so many miles,
Yeah.
office spaces aren't being filled or there are too many.
Mhm. Yeah, so the request was made that rather than the C4 land use allowances, that the zoning change and development agreement restrict the uses here to the C3 office district, which would prohibit any retail or other auto-oriented uses as they were laid out in the request. But looking at the current economic and development environment, offices haven't really been very prevalent lately to be constructed. We have the Berkshire Commons Office Park that's, I think it's 0.6 miles west of this. And it has, I think it's 12 of the 19 lots are undeveloped. We have had a couple that have tried to go through the process in the last couple of years. One of them has run into some challenges with access issues in a neighboring property. So it's kind of in limbo right now. And then the other one ended up withdrawing because the cost of construction for a single tenant building was just too much to offset the value they would get.
So do we make decisions in the past based off that radius of, there are too many office spaces, there are unused office spaces, that type of thing, and we restrict that usage?
Well, office would still be allowed. It would just be allowed in addition to the C4 uses. I would say that it is in the city's best interest to consider the other land you currently have available for development within different zoning designations and those uses. So you don't want to be overly saturated with one use that isn't developing frequently.
And what would the radius be that you'd be looking at for that type of study?
I mean, for Clive, I'd probably look at the city as a whole. And then you could break out into our planning areas.
How many open offices or offices in general space is available in Clive?
Sure, I mean, that would be one metric, but this just is I know the argument was made that office use would be viable here by the neighboring property owner, and staff doesn't necessarily feel that that would be readily developed.
Like,
Ted?
Well, but I think the point is that it's one option of many options, right? That we want to leave it open for multiple options, not just office. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Office could certainly still be
right? It's
built
one
in the
option of
C4.
multiple options.
Mhm.
Okay. So could you, I know we're not at site plan, but could you give me a little more detail on the 50-foot buffer? Are there
Mhm.
any other requirements there? So I have a better understanding of the buffer between the car wash and the potential residents north of that?
Yeah, so it'll be our typical 50-foot landscape buffer that is with all of our various commercial uses adjacent to residential. So it has the per 30 linear feet, so many evergreen, overstory, and ornamental trees required. So it's just our standard ordinance language.
There's going to be an access road in there. Could you talk more about that and explain that in more detail?
Sure. So back in the 2016 rezoning, some of the language that was included with that was the need for the area to have integrated access and routing. Of course, Hickman Road is a restricted access, and then the long-term opening here of the median is in question with the DOT. So primarily the access points are going to be 156 or likely just right turns into this area. So having that circulation throughout this block is pretty critical to having successful development. So they are showing, this is the Iowa Trust project that's currently under development with their layout. And they're showing an additional access point along the north leg of Emerald Isle Drive. And then an opportunity for 2 additional accesses on the east leg of Emerald Isle Drive. So those connection points, then this frontage road here could extend into this lot. And then also this area right here is the ingress egress access easement that the city required Iowa Trust and Savings to include on their plans for dedication at the time of final plat, consistent with the 2016 zoning change and development agreement. So that would be an option for this property to connect to if it was suitable for that specific site development. So it's not an absolute guarantee that it would connect there, but there is a high likelihood that they would to have access to another exit there. It may end up just looping back to this one though. We won't know until a site plan would come in.
Ted?
Amanda, so the frontage road there and the ingress into the lot 3, the reason why it's so far north of Hickman is that because it can't be so close, like that's not a straight line, it's kind of
Yeah.
curved, is because it's so close to Hickman?
Yep, that's to get the necessary separation from the intersection and to allow for vehicle stacking as well in the turn lanes.
So would it be fair to say that that's a legitimate reason for why the car wash can't be on lot 3? Just geometrically, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, with
the piece of
the
it.
kind of the elongated building and the general site flow, it could potentially be challenging. They also can't really get this much closer to the corner here because we have the same right of way and access restrictions for street intersections.
So it's not really viable to move the car wash from lot 2 to lot 3 because of the geometry of the lot?
Yeah, it would be very difficult
Okay.
to function well.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Man, you're talking about Emerald Isle Drive and the improvements that were needed there and costs associated with that, please.
Sure. So the city's estimating it's going to be approximately $1 million road for those improvements. For what's remaining, Iowa Trust and Savings is constructing that portion with their development. And then the city will have the other half of that cost as part of the assistance and agreement with the Emerald Isle Townhomes. The city chose to absorb that half more or less of the obligation there. So then for this remaining section, we're estimating it'll be around $1 million. That does include the 3-lane improvement at the intersection here. There's also a need for storm sewer to be installed. There's the regional detention facility back right in this area off the map. So today there's not storm pipe that really gets through this area at all. So that will be an expense as well associated with the street improvements that is kind of yet to be determined. We have to get into the engineering and design before that's fully decided what the best routing is, and then any needed easement or property acquisitions that might go along with that.
That cost is not budgeted, right? It's not. planned.
It's not line item budgeted currently. I don't know, Doug or Matt want to expand on that?
I think the best way to characterize this is the notion that this is a $1 million roadway improvement is order of magnitude at this point. We've not gotten into any level of design detail, don't even have survey yet for understanding truly what's going on. So that is, again, intended to kind of identify the order of magnitude so that both sides, if you will, and future property owners to the north that might be engaged in this process have some level of understanding of what might happen. In terms of the roadway itself, again, we have really two processes that could be followed. One, which we're very familiar with, which is development is brought before us. And in conjunction with the approval processes, that developer or property owner installs the roadway improvements or other infrastructure. That's part of their development process, and they dedicate and deed those improvements to the city once they're completed. There are circumstances similar to this in which, it's not a cornfield, go and build new roadway infrastructure, where we have situations where the infrastructure is not necessarily planned or programmed or ready to roll because we have no idea when the development was going to occur. So this is a circumstance where you've got a piece of property that we know from staff level and city's perspective that improvements need to be made for infrastructure. We feel that those improvements need to be made in conjunction with the development itself because of the demand that's going to be created from it. But we do not have this programmed in our CIP or in our work process at the moment. So as we kind of discuss that with the property owner, there's the solution of developer build the infrastructure in conjunction with their proposed site plan. That obviously is a different circumstance than the alternative here, which is city can undertake the project, build the improvements, and then in essence, allocate costs for that improvement to benefited parties, which in this case, the development has half of the infrastructure in terms of the benefit. There are other adjacent property owners, individual single-family homes, as well as some commercial properties that are not necessarily ready for the infrastructure. And the city would anticipate working with those individual developments in the future for compensation of their development impacts. So in this particular case, in the discussions with the developer, they've requested that the process be utilized in the latter format, in which the city would design, construct, and then they would pay for their share of the improvements.
But is it fair to say, I think what I heard you say is it's not in the CIP. It wasn't something prepared for. Like any business decision or decision you have to make, it's what you've budgeted for and what you've prepared for. Your staff isn't probably not ready for another project at this magnitude, right? And the money is certainly not there. That's what my biggest concern is of this. It is the infrastructure piece and how we move forward with that. And to me, it will be a concern of mine if that's needs to be switched gear. Legislators every year are changing our budgets. That's a fact. And what they do up at the State House has consequences. And I've said this before in a meeting. And this is where those consequences really come into effect. When I've asked the city manager to give me a number of what it's going to cost us, how much is going to be removed from our budget over the next year, 2, 3 years, 5 years, because of what happened at the State House, we can't give those answers yet. And so now to say roll a dice for $1 million, can't do it, right? Fiscally, it's not a sound decision as a city councilman for the city to do that without the known equation there of how much we're losing out of our budget. This council has discussed roads and how much more money we need for roads and other projects. We've set the CIP, we've set the budget, we've set the priorities for staff. We see that every time Matt comes back with his colored chart. So I would say that we're going to have to make a decision of what we lose off that chart, time-wise for staff and money-wise for the roads. So does 99th get cut? Does Clark get cut? Does Summit get cut? Something's going to have to be cut for $1 million. That's just the base dollars. We're not talking stormwater and other things because that's the real money that's coming out of this budget. That's my concern up front.
So can I ask a quick question? I completely understand where Mike's going with that. It makes a lot of sense. It's a great point. I'm assuming we could bond for this. Is that an accurate statement, Matt? So it wouldn't have to necessarily be a net zero or zero sum kind of game here. We in theory we could bond for it. Is that right?
Yes and no. So I wouldn't say zero sum. So when the city issues debt for infrastructure, there has to be some kind of revenue source, whether it's our debt service levy through property taxes or other revenue sources. Now, granted, there's a portion of this roadway that initially would be funded by the development. I think some of that's the devil's in the details too, in terms of, is it all 3 lots or just 1 lot that's developed at first? And so how long to those 3 lots? If I understand the way the agreement's drafted, Amanda, is that it wouldn't be until those lots are developed that those other 2 lots would actually pay for their portion of the improvement. So that's a huge thing to know. So they're only paying a third of their, because they're developing the one with the car wash up rate initially. Now a second one may come fairly quickly. So the city's fronting that cost, and then there needs to be money up front to build the road. So we would either need a bond for that, again, either backed by the debt service levy. Now this area is also in a tax increment financing district, and so that's also another way to finance it. But what I would say is there's still a choice to be made of those resources could have gone to other things. And it's a question of, does the council prefer those resources to go towards facilitating development or something else? It's a choice.
Matt, something you said just piqued my interest. So you said that, like, as we currently understand the agreement, it's the developed lot that's going to pay their portion after it's developed. Since it's not the corner lot, the east side of Emerald Isle Drive wouldn't get the reimbursement, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
So the way that the agreement is laid out, and Doug and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we would recommend that the full street be built right away, because you don't want to come back and have to do it piecemeal. Wouldn't be the ideal way to do the construction. You definitely could phase it. You could do the north leg and the east leg in separate phases, and you may need to do a little bit of that for access anyway.
And then we're paying for extra maintenance down the road because they don't, whatever the case is, they may not wear evenly.
Well, and I think part of what you might have too is there's no specific time frame on when the lots to the north and the lots to the east redevelop. Emerald Isle Drive has taken decades to redevelop. these parcels, even before Come and Go came along, you know, they've sat empty for quite a while. And so the city would be carrying the cost of even if all 3 lots develop and the reimbursement for 50% of the roadway happens, the city would be carrying the cost for the north and the east until those lots develop. I don't think it would be, at least I wouldn't advise the council to assess those properties at this time for that portion of the roadway, because they're not the ones that are needing the redeveloped roadway. It's really the development that's needing it. And so there would be an unknown time frame that cost would be carried, whether it's through, again, the city's debt service levy or another revenue function. So you could say 50% of the cost could be carried for 10, 15 years. It's an unknown.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but Amanda, if you can throw that image back up, or Matthew, like the Emerald Isle Drive to the north, that's, north of the developed area is very little compared to the overall Emerald Isle Drive construction that we're talking about.
Mhm.
And so, the majority of that Emerald Isle Drive is connected to that lot 3.
Yes.
It's the most frontage, yeah.
So you're right. In a lot of our agreements, they are based on street frontage. In this case, that was an obvious red flag because that lot's going to have a huge bill. So it is just an even third
Okay,
for each lot for the whole of that portion of the street.
got it. Okay, that helps.
So would it be fair to say that if the developer does not want to front that cost, that 50% that the city's going to front, but we have these carrying costs, that we could structure something such that they're not fronting it, but that we ensure that we're made whole for whatever those additional carrying costs are, whether that's interest payments and create, I don't know what the schedule would be for that, but to ensure that, again, they could front it if that's their choice, or go on a payment plan and cover those carrying costs, so that we're made whole, so that we address a lot of Mike's concerns.
Definitely could be something that could be negotiated in the agreement. What I'll say is the agreement, the way it's drafted right now, does not do that. So it would have to
Right.
require amendments to the current proposed development and zoning change agreement. But yes, that could be, if the applicant is willing to consider that, that is definitely something we can look at.
Anything else for Amanda or Doug? Otherwise, we'll have the applicant and parties come forward.
I do have a
Please.
comment to make, and that is, I definitely don't want to convey any kind of impression that we're closed for business, that we're not supportive of development, which is not necessarily what I'm hearing here. But quite often, we're being faced with opportunities for housing or for nonprofit related entities. This is a legitimate commercial development, and we hope to have more of that opportunity along the way. So I would just encourage my colleagues to be careful about that and showing that we want to be supportive of this kind of development for sure.
And that's, I think, part of my intent of throwing out, hey, is there a creative solution we can come up with here that satisfies both parties? So.
Thanks, Susan. Okay. Anything else? Perhaps we'll start with the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Joel Templeman with the Little Somali Law Firm, 505 Fifth Avenue, Suite 1005, Des Moines. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, and we agree with staff's recommendation, and we thank staff for all their work on this project for us. We've been before you a couple of times now and continued, so we're happy to have an opportunity to talk tonight and hopefully discuss this matter further. But we're here tonight, as you know, on the rezoning application. And just to reiterate a few things, we were before P&Z and they unanimously voted to recommend approval of this rezoning request. As Amanda indicated, our request is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and future land use map. The comprehensive plan actually identifies this area as an underutilized area ripe for development. And so we think the request that we're making today is consistent with the city's planning documents. Our proposed use is a permitted use within the C4 zoning. And for those reasons, we'd ask for you to support our request this evening and vote to approve the rezoning to C4. We have several representatives here this evening from the applicant. And so we're happy to answer any questions that you may have for us. I think Amanda did a very good job of laying out the area, the history through the previous come and go development and what we're seeking tonight. But I do want to focus on the rezoning request. And I think that we meet all the tests for that to be approved based upon analysis of the comp plan and future land use map and the surrounding commercial area. But like I said, we're happy to answer any questions you may have, either myself or any other representatives from the applicant.
Questions? Michael?
Well, let's just get to that topic we had earlier. And maybe your answer is just as easy and that's behind us. Is the applicant favorable to just paying the 1 million? I think that takes a huge piece off of my table. We're not a bank. And right now, to be honest, I mean, I'm not sure. I understand Susan's comment and I support it. But there's a line there of saying, even with Ted's proposal, it'll be a tough one for me to say at our bonding rate and other things, do we pick winners and losers by giving you the interest rates that the city can get versus what you all go out? Maybe I can go to that. I think it was an interesting compromise, but I think I'm stuck with the point of unbudgeted. We don't have the staff, quite frankly, I don't think, on a priority list of where to put them onto this new project. But again, the $1 million+ is a big issue. So the applicant says, I have no problem. We've been talking about it. That takes a big one off my plate.
Sure. Let me ask Doug a question. Now the total cost of the road would be 1 million, correct? I mean, I know you don't have an estimate, but I think that was my impression. So we'd be responsible for 50% of that cost.
Correct.
Okay.
Whatever the ultimate improvement expenses. And again, at this moment, order of magnitude, approximately $1 million, subject to design and so forth. So yes, in this circumstance, for this discussion, it's $1 million improvement. This subject site has 50% of the benefit of that improvement.
But with nobody else yet to pay the other 50%.
Correct. The other half of the improvement would be the obligation of future development, both to the north and to the east of Emerald Isle Drive, as they create additional demand for that utility.
But by them fronting it, they would be reimbursed at the point that additional development happens. Is that accurate?
If the question is with the applicant building the roadway and then they are carrying the other half until such point as those adjacent property owners create a demand for it.
Correct.
That would be a different approach than we have historically seen. Not necessarily one that we've had that specific conversation about in this case.
And I think a year or two down the road, it changes. We can put it in our CIP. We can prepare for this and we can get the personnel. We can do strategic planning. I mean, these are real dollars, and especially until again, well, and you've got a whole team here, and Mr. Edelman might be able to answer it, but how does the legislators' clawback affect us financially to the city of Clive specifically, right? Because those are the dollars I wonder about, not to mention the dollars that are unbudgeted.
Right. TJ Nelson, Midwest Fidelity Partners. Totally respect your concerns. $1 million is, I can't find that in the couch cushions. We did meet with city staff and we talked through a variety of scenarios. Our priority, of course, is getting up to the access points for our customers into the development. Totally respect, the ease of doing it all at once from a maintenance, construction, design standpoint. And we did talk through scenarios of if we paid first or the city paid first, how we do all of that. So we're open to ideas from the council to do that because we want to see this development get put through and ignite development in the rest of the area. You know, we got 2 projects tonight. Each will be about 30,000 a year in property tax and combined. And then we'll also have $6 million in revenue that sales tax can get applied to. So that'll help, you know, add towards paying for that road for the city's budget in future years.
Were you answering the question I asked Mr. Edelman, or were you? No, he knows what I'm saying. What is the lost money by the legislators that have taken money back? And I'm trying to fill that gap. And maybe you don't have an answer tonight. That's fine.
Yeah, that I would defer to Mr. Edelman.
David Edelman, 4252 Foster Drive, Des Moines. Appreciate the question. If I had a magic ball, I'd be a better lobbyist. I don't have a magic ball. I think what TJ was referring to, though, and just working with city staff, the ability for them to actually front that. So what Councilman Weaver had suggested would be a potential option. Obviously, we don't know what the legislature is going to do. I don't want to distract from kind of the topic of conversation at hand. But, you know, obviously understand your concerns, and it is real money.
Yeah. And so that's where I sit. I can't in good faith say yes to something we don't have the money for.
And I think, yeah, and again, I don't want to speak for my client, but I think they are willing to work with city staff to find an opportunity for them to be able to take care of it. And so it's not a burden to the city.
Thank you.
You bet.
That helps. Matt?
If I could offer to Your Honor for the council in terms of further negotiations on that point, whether it's, you know, developer fronting the costs, and of course they're going to want some kind of assurances of when those dollars would be paid back if that was a scenario. And so there may be timeframes, things that we could look at, whether it's when those properties develop to the north, or is the city a backstop in the middle, where then, to Councilmember McCoy's point, there's time for us to incorporate things into a CIP, into a budget that's in a reasonable time frame for the property owner, a reasonable time frame for the city. There could be some discussions had, particularly obviously you're on the first reading tonight. So you know, that could be something where if the council's supportive of moving forward with the first reading, we could have conversations and maybe come back with some options for the second reading. Of course, you've got 3 full readings for this particular proposal. So those are things I would offer the council for consideration.
Thanks, Matt. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? Hearing none.
Move to close public hearing.
Well, we want to give the bank the opportunity. There are 2 parties here tonight.
May I make a comment?
You may make a comment.
Not really a question for you. Thank you for the movement you've made. And I've seen it, others have seen it. You have made a lot of movement from that first meeting I was at. I apologize I couldn't make that, but you've made a lot of movement. It shows goodwill, and that's gone a long way. So I look, if I can get over some of these other hurdles, I look forward to more movement.
And I would have a comment too, and that is with our new Economic Vitality Committee, there has been identification that we really do need to be supportive of commercial development. In many communities, they will help to drive potential tenants to locations. It's not something our city has done as often. We've kind of waited for people to come to us. But I would suggest that the council keep in mind that we're a forward-looking community. We can be in a position to take a stake in a development by really trying to help and being supportive and not obstructive to it. So.
Very good. Does the bank have any comments to offer?
I can move that machine out of your way.
That's fine. No, don't worry about it. Sure. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the council. I'm Ben Bruner with the Dickinson Law Firm, 699 Walnut Street here in Des Moines. And I'm here on behalf of Iowa Trust and Savings Bank. There's some other representatives here. They're very excited to be building their kind of market headquarters at 156 and Hickman here, which will be kind of a statement development, and it's directly adjacent to the proposed development here tonight. It'll be a high quality development, ultimately at a prime location in Clive. And the bank, as kind of an Iowa business and bank and a current corporate citizen of Clive, is truly excited to be at that spot. So as you can imagine, the bank is making a major investment in this location and has some general concerns and some specific concerns as it relates to the operations and safety of the adjacent lots. As you know, it's more important now than ever to take a close look at the developments and uses that are being proposed here. There's limited development land in Clive, and so I think it takes a fine tooth comb and a sharp eye to truly vet these proposals and ensure they're in harmony with the concurrent developments and uses of the neighboring properties that are making large investments themselves. So the proposed car wash use, in our view, clearly is not the best and optimal use for this parcel, and it's clearly not in harmony with the adjacent and neighboring property owners and developments who are here today. Ultimately, I've detailed kind of our specific concerns as it relates to traffic, internal traffic, now that a reinserted roadway has been entered into this proposal. Light, noise disruption, both to the bank and the property to the north. So those are issues that we feel truly aren't able to be mitigated or addressed through the site plan requirements. And so we had kind of offered what we thought was a fair kind of compromise or proposal here. And essentially we have, 4 items that we'd request that the council either condition any rezoning upon, or ultimately if they feel it's not the project for this space, ultimately deny the rezoning. First condition we'd ask for, again, I think it was talked about earlier, but pushing the car wash operation furthest east away from the bank lot. I think there may be some engineering challenges that are noted, but ultimately I think that needs to be explored. I think that would open up the 2 additional lots for a more flexible development of those 2 lots, which could accommodate, I think, a more robust and optimal use of this property. And then again, the internal safety concerns, we'd ask for the removal of the internal roadway connection between the bank lot and these 3 now additional operations. Reasonable use restrictions. Again, we feel it's most appropriate that C3 would be the proper classification for this property. I think it hasn't been developed up to this point just because of the development agreement that ultimately required the acquiring of the residential lots and then ultimately rezoning. So I think it's taken some time ultimately to get to this point. And then 4, with these lots now being truncated from 2 parcels down to 3 or up to 3, I think ultimately that just increases the risk of noise, light, and related disruptions. And with those small sizes, I think it works a limitation on the expanded buffers as it relates to sound buffering, light buffering. So ultimately, we think the problems that we've addressed and shown up to this point with the original proposal have kind of just been amplified and exaggerated now with the 3 smaller lots and 3 separate operations. So again, that would be our pitch. First and foremost, I think ultimately with the rezoning agreement, we were somewhat in the dark as far as what the terms were or negotiated, and then the reasonings behind those. I appreciate kind of the thought appeasing some of our concerns, but ultimately we had kind of requested some additions or tweaks to that, and our requests were ultimately denied in full just a couple of days ago. So minimally, we'd request additional time to look at internal traffic analysis, look at additional, I guess, reconfiguring of the different operations that are proposed and pushing the car wash to the east. I think it begs some time outside of a public hearing for the parties to get together and truly talk through that rezoning agreement. And certainly if there's going to be changes as it relates to funding of the infrastructure, Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Iowa Trust, the northern stretch of Emerald Isle, I believe the bank is fronting that cost and then will ultimately get reimbursed at some point.
Yes, that was their preference at the time of their site plan approval. So they wouldn't, their access would be open when they opened rather than being shut for the city to construct later.
So I just make note of
Paying
that.
100% of that.
The bank.
The north half of the improvement that is not part of the bank's benefit
Correct.
is being reimbursed by the city. at the conclusion of the process.
Got it.
And that was a part of the townhome development deal that we put together.
In
Because the
advance.
town, because the townhome is to the project to
There's
the
already
north.
development there.
To make that work with, there's the Sheridan Road connection on the north side of that in a traditional format, the townhome development would have been liable for that, but we had some other considerations with the Sheridan Drive on the north side. So the city is stepping in for the reimbursement on the north half of what's being constructed out there right today.
But done in advance, this deal is done in advance of some of the unknowns
Correct.
by the legislators.
Correct.
Okay.
So I guess in summary, again, we feel there's additional time and discussion that's necessary amongst the stakeholders here to kind of talk through the terms of this rezoning agreement outside of a formal hearing here. I think the parties could get together and hopefully resolve some of these issues. If you feel it necessary to move forward with a vote up or down, obviously we have general and specific concerns as it relates to operations, safety, and the effect it'll have on the adjacent properties that we'd request you deny the rezoning request. And then ultimately, if you do feel it's appropriate to move forward with the rezoning as proposed, again, the conditions we had kind of laid out previously as far as use restrictions on the other lots, pushing the car wash operation to the east, reconfiguring the car wash operation so that continuously running vacuums are pushing east instead of west, and then enhanced buffering for light, noise, and landscaping. That would be our preference. So we thank everybody for their time and attention to this. It's been a thoughtful process by all parties, and we appreciate staff and the applicant certainly for engaging in the conversations. We just think ultimately this isn't the right time and use to rezone. And ultimately, I think there are issues that are permeating this proposal.
All right, questions? Michael?
I wait for others, but I do. So I will walk down your four with you if you don't mind. I'm not a real estate whiz. I don't know much about it. I would
Kidding.
guess, and I barely can ask Weaver for advice. I would assume the bank bought a corner lot for a reason, right? Behind the real estate. I imagine it's the most valuable, it's the most accessible, right? Am I onto something, or is that kind of where real estate goes, right?
I would track that same sentiment. I'll have some representatives from the bank here if they all want to offer their.
I truly haven't made up my mind on this one yet. I'm being pulled on a lot of directions and coming into this for a lot of reasons. But I think if I was a client of the bank telling you, I want to use up the most valuable piece of the land for a corner lot, you may say, look at your business plan a little bit more before I fund you. I think that's what they're doing, right? I don't buy into that they can't put the car wash on the corner. I don't buy that at all. They can put the car wash on the corner. Is it the most valuable? I do buy that. And so why put the car wash on the corner? They did move it over one. So we've made movement, right? They're saving the corner in my eyes. It's only my opinion and ignorance. I get it. But they're only keeping the corner lot for the value, and they should, right? As an investment for them. The removal of the internal road, I don't get, because in your agreement, you had to put that internal road in. Therefore, you knew the internal roads were coming. So to do it and now ask for it to be removed, we might as well removed it from the original agreement. But you didn't. You agreed to it.
I would just say that was a condition to ultimately the bank development, but sure, I think a lot of that was under the assumption we'd have a little bit more clarity and say in what the overall site plan would be for the adjacent track.
But why would you without buying the rest? You had the chance to buy it, then you have the say. You can't have the say just because you built it first. Why would the bank have it? I'm just being a devil's advocate. Again, I'm coming into this, it was not favorable, right, for the applicant with me. And so, but I'm being a devil's, C3 is the same question. What was the understanding prior to building the bank, what the rest of that land was going to be? If it was acquired, could it be C4?
If I recall, I think
They're asking for it to only be C3.
Certainly, there has not been any any discussion or intent with Come and Go or other parties previous to that this would be an office corner. It had always been as part of the land use plan, commercial, retail, and service. Again, that doesn't preclude office, banks, doctors, et cetera, being in that space. It just allows for a broader mix of neighborhood support, retail, and commercial service, just like the other three quadrants.
But could be a car wash.
Car wash, again, catty corner to this particular intersection is a car wash. Car wash adjacent to a retail strip
There's car washes everywhere.
with a fast food restaurant, a bank,
They're everywhere.
a Come and Go that used to be. So, the uses can range within this type of zoning district. They are generally neighborhood support, commercial uses.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll clarify, we're pointing to C3 as kind of the ideal classification, but ultimately I think it's just borrowing certain prohibitions from that C3 classification, auto-oriented operations, laundry, detergents, dry cleaning, ultimately fast food operations that would be again right next to the bank property. So I don't want to make our request as being, we need the C3 allowances and that's it. It's borrowing certain pieces of that to, I think, make this more harmonious with the bank parcel and then ultimately the applicant's parcel.
I do get it. I mean, I do.
That's pretty limiting though.
But that's opportunistic. Once you own the property to say, I
Yeah.
don't want the roadway now. I don't want the bank. I don't want the Burger Kings. I don't want. Now you're picking and choosing, saying what I want next to my bank. And I guess what the bank should have said is, oh, I'm going to grab all the land. And then I get to dictate what goes there.
I'll know. So I represent banks primarily as my client base, and there's prohibitions on what they can buy land for.
Right.
They can't buy and hold it
Right.
for speculation or development. It
Right.
truly has to be bank related. So
Or bigger headquarters.
talk to these guys.
It's a beautiful building, by the way, and the plans are beautiful. So I get why you don't want that. So.
Sure.
Other questions for Ben?
May I ask a question here? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think the fourth point, I thought you were going to go to the fourth point.
Well, the fourth one is the 2 lots out of the 3 lots.
Are
And if-
you, are you still, my understanding is the applicant is doing 3 lots or is it not doing 3 lots? It is. And is your request to move to 2 back to the prior?
No, our objections are that a lot of our concerns are being amplified by the now
Right. And so the
3
question I
smaller
have is, are
lots.
you wanting to go back to 2?
Potentially, if it would push the car wash to the
to the
east,
corner.
leave the lot adjacent to the bank open with certain reasonable use restrictions.
Would you be completely open to this whole plan if the car wash was on 3? Would you drop the rest of everything?
If the car wash was on the far east.
Yeah.
Potentially, I mean,
Well,
that's a key piece, yeah.
well, but are we going to hear about the lighting and the curb size?
I mean,
and the
that-
roadway cutout?
That
and-
addresses the bulk of our specific concerns as it relates to those items, certainly.
Okay.
Can we hear from the applicant whether that's an option? We've heard from Amanda a bit on that, but I'd like to hear from them. Because that does seem to solve the problem.
Well, from an engineering standpoint, well, let me take a step back first of all and just talk to the process we've gone through and the modifications we've made to our development plan in an attempt to appease the bank. We've offered, first of all, we came in with the 2 lot development. That was not, they didn't like that. We offered them to make us an offer to purchase one of the lots. They weren't interested in doing that. We haven't had any direct communication with the bank or the representatives of the bank since the June 22nd hearing, which was continued. So we'd be more than happy to, we would have been more than happy, we still are more than happy to have discussions with the bank about what may or may not work. The adjustments we've made to our plan that we've presented tonight was to appease the bank by moving and creating a 3 lot scenario versus a 2 lot scenario, moving our car wash to the middle lot. That serves as a bigger buffer. We still have the 50-foot landscape buffer to the north. So we've done a lot of accommodations for the bank. And so as far as, and to answer your question about lot 3 now, from an engineering standpoint, I don't know if that works because of I don't have the picture in front of me, because of the way that the frontage road or the access road bows up off Hickman. You'd have to, eliminate that second access point, which would be critical for a car wash. So for our business, it doesn't work. So we have been, I think, very accommodating, or attempting to be very accommodating to the neighbor. We've attempted to communicate with them. So from that standpoint, we're definitely happy to continue discussions regarding the terms of the development agreement that we talked about, previously, as we continue this process. But we would ask the council to vote for tonight's first reading to approve our zoning request based upon what we've presented, what we've shown tonight, what staff has discussed tonight. But if I'm probably not answering a direct question, I probably forgot what you asked me.
Mr. Weaver asked you.
So, Mr. Weaver, do you have
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I just want to make sure. I don't think I
He's
answered
Reiterate
your direct
your
question.
he
So
asked.
I just want to make sure that
It's on the east, putting it on the east,
and
east parcel.
from an
Yeah,
engineering
so,
standpoint, I don't
one
know
of
if
the
that
things
works.
Scott and I were just talking about, because I get the fact that frontage road bows, you've got the other access point on Emerald Isle,
Mhm.
and we have to close that up, but could we not have an access point on like the northwest corner of lot 3, so that you do have 2 access points then? And I don't know, to me that, I'm not an engineer, but that seems to solve the problem.
Yeah, and
I'm not
say the
sure.
same thing as a layperson, that seems to give you the flow you potentially need without interfering with, hey, you have a bunch of cars piling up in the car.
Because you only have one entrance. and
Yeah, I'm sure I can defer to our engineer. He's probably looked at that. But one thing I want to just reiterate before I sit down is that our rezoning request has to do with those 5 residential properties to the north. A portion of this property that we're looking to develop is already zoned C4. So we're not, by any stretch of the imagination, we're not looking to downzone some of that property to C3. We want to continue to have it C4 and then add the 5 residential properties, make that C4. But a portion of this property is already zoned C4. So to downzone that to C3 in this area, in our opinion.
I don't think we're looking to limit our options here
Okay.
to downzone. That, at least.
I just
for me,
wanted to
that's-
address
Yeah,
one of the
that's
4
not on
bullet
the
points
table.
made.
I guess where I stand with this is the first reading.
Correct.
I think that there's potential here. There's a framework that we could work through. My position is, let's vote to move this forward. I understand Mr. Bruner's position on time, but it's the first reading. You have time. We have time to get the parties together and figure out a mutually agreeable solution here, and work with staff. There's lots of, our staff is very creative, can come up with lots of different options. So that's where I stand, is I would support moving this forward for now and let's see if we can get the parties together to figure out a mutually agreeable solution. I personally love the idea of moving it to lot 3, doing what Shrikant and I said. Again, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if that would work, but to me, that solves a lot of their concerns, a lot of their problems. I know that the townhome developers to the north has some concerns. I also had a lot of concerns on the residential side of things, but I think that the developer here, Midwest, has satisfied a lot of my concerns with respect to that. So I'm good on that piece of it. So I think that there's still a lot to be discussed, but I think we could move this forward.
Yeah, a couple of things. I want to commend the applicant on being very flexible with your approach. You've shown a willingness to work with the bank, and I appreciate that. On the other hand, I certainly understand the bank. You have some very valid concerns. You're putting a major investment in with the signature headquarters right there from your bank. So certainly understand there. I did have a question on the original application. The location of the car wash faced east, and now it's facing west right there. Why the shift on that, and why not have it face east where you can have the noise, the vacuums, and more of the light and the traffic away from the bank? Why the shift on that?
Josh Johnson, Houston Engineering, been working with our clients on multiple car washes and getting these all set up. So we had it in this layout to begin with, next to the bank. flipped it 180 degrees to help with that sound. When we moved it over, we flipped it back to 180 degrees. And the intent is that when you come off of Hickman, so the intent with this is that when you come off of Hickman, which we believe will be a lot of our traffic in this, in the way traffic flows, is that now you're able to come in and get into queue and then pay and go through the wash and exit and take access to the back base. That's the intent with why we rotated around. Best access for our clients, best circulation. We flipped that. It just, again, it's just the convenience of getting it down in that manner. It will function from an engineering standpoint that way, but from a client access standpoint, that's why we chose that layout. And the blowers. So then what that means is that our blowers, the dryers, thank you, are actually facing the noisiest part of our project, which is Hickman and 156. And so now we're not pushing any of the most noisiest piece of our, and it's not, I mean, if you look at the sound study, it's not terrible, but all of the noise that would be generated goes towards the loudest part of our site, which is Hickman Road. So instead of
do that facing east.
What I'm saying is, the biggest concern on all of these sites is always noise, right? That's their biggest, to be honest, that's what the bank has said has been their biggest issue, along with circulation into their site. But by pushing the exit of the tunnel and the blowers towards the noisiest part, we're not pointing them towards the residential side. So that was the intent behind all of that. So, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, what we're looking at here is to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second, close public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote?
Mine went down. Matthew, so I'm a yes. Yeah.
All right, so that passes by a vote of 4 with 1 abstention. So what we have before us then is the potential first reading of ordinance number 1136.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Just as a reminder too, that this issue was tabled from 2 previous meetings, so there will need to be a motion to bring the item off of the table before the first consideration.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to take it off the table. For discussion, seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4 yes and 1 abstention. It's off the table and now can be considered.
I'll move that ordinance number 1136, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Motion is second for the first reading. Further discussion? Seeing none.
I did, because I do need to explain my vote. In no way will my vote be an indicator if it continues to be this side. I am going to be a yes vote for the first reading to see if some of these things can be worked out. But it will be no guarantee that I am a yes vote in the second reading or the third reading if we can't see movement on these things. I think they're fairly simple agreements that can be made by the 2 parties. And if not, the big financial one that I'm looking for with the city is not negotiable with me. And so when I'm hearing there's movement tonight on the finance piece and some of the other things, I'm in favor of voting yes. But again, I want to make that clear so that when we leave, we don't just sit and wait for 2 weeks and not talk to each other, because the next time it will just be a no vote. But
well, before we move further on that, perhaps either legal counsel or Matt could outline procedurally. Again, we need 4 votes tonight, and then we'll need 4 votes on the subsequent ones. What are the consequences of not getting 4 votes?
Well, this is rezoning vote and with a protest petition filed and one abstention, we actually need all 4 to vote in favor in order for this to move forward to a second reading. Of course, if there's one no vote or in this reading or the future, that will kill the motion and the parties will have to either start over or do something else. So
And if they had to start over, what is the waiting period then?
actually, I don't know the
Yeah,
answer to that. Your Honor.
it's, Doug, why don't you clarify that? It's 1 year and it's tied to the property. So the specific properties that are being requested for rezoning, which again is the 4 or 5 houses, 4 houses, 5 houses, those specific pieces of property that were not, if this fails at any point, those 5 properties would not be allowed to have another request for rezoning for a year.
Thank you.
For our zoning ordinance.
Just want to make sure everyone was clear on that. And it sounds like the sentiment, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the council would like the parties to continue working together to try to come up with a solution. Would that be a fair statement? So
Your Honor, I believe counsel for the bank may have additional comment to add. I know this may be out of procedural posture as you're in the middle of a vote.
Apologies, it's strictly procedural. So I guess I'm just requesting clarification as to if the first reading is approved, is that approving the redevelopment agreement as proposed? Is it approving the concept plan?
Yeah, thank you for the
proposed?
thank you for the clarification. What's proposed in the packet is a conditional rezoning that this ordinance is being approved conditionally with the development agreement that's been presented in the packet. So as presented, it's a kind of a package vote with that ordinance.
But with the understanding that there are a lot of other components to this that staff can work with all sides as far as how we want to structure this financially to satisfy certain concerns, things of that nature. So yeah, we're passing what's in the packet, but with the understanding that that's not going to probably pass through all 3 readings.
So the zoning change agreement is incorporated into the zoning ordinance. So until the 3rd reading is approved, that can be amended.
So anything else?
No, Your Honor,
Counsel?
you have a motion and a second. We are ready for the vote. Unless you had more clarification.
No, that was
Okay.
all we needed at this juncture. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And 4 votes are required to move this forward. And would clerk please post those votes? And that passes with 4 yeses and 1 abstention. So that will move on. And the parties have some work to do next few weeks before the second reading. So thank you. Amanda, I think we have a car wash on Hickman Court to be considered.
Yes, so everyone, shake your brain real quick, get the last car wash out. This is the same applicant, completely different location, but same overall kind of development layout for the car wash portion. So this is at the corner of Hickman Court and Northwest 100th Street. Most of you probably recognize that is the former Burger King. It's been vacant for a couple years. And I am sure I'm not the only one to be excited to see that building hopefully going soon. It's not in the greatest visual shape, at least. So that site was developed in 2002. And as I said, the Burger King did close a couple years ago. So it's been sitting vacant since that time. And Midwest Fidelity Partners has acquired the property and they're submitting a plan for a 2-lane tunnel car wash. Very similar with the layout and routing is to the previous one you guys looked at. So this portion of the site here, we have Hickman Court, and then this is actually that private drive, frontage road, backage road, however you want to conceptualize that. So you have Casey's over here, Valvoline, and then Horizon Event Center is kind of off there. So that drive is going to remain intact, except for a few areas that have been noted for removal and maintenance type replacement. And then it's really the interior of the site that will be demolished and redeveloped. So you can see all the dark gray paving is essentially the demolition area. So the proposed car wash is approximately 4,800 square feet. The building contains obviously the car wash and the equipment. And there's a small interior space for the cashier. They also use a centralized vacuum. So this is the kind of motor and equipment of the vacuum that'll be located near the building. And you can see on the site plan, there are the vacuum overheads here in the parking area, which generally look like that. So being the centralized vacuum, those are not as noisy as kind of the old school vacuums that you're used to seeing at more of the touchless car wash style. So that makes that, it mitigates quite a bit of the noise concerns there. The exterior of the building is primarily a precast concrete. They are proposing both a textured and a smooth precast, as well as some color variation there. Red is their logo color. They have limited it largely on the building, so it's not the entire expanse of the building being red. So staff did feel that was consistent with the requirements in our development standards manual. We do have other businesses that highlight their color, but we were not supportive of having like the entire building be red. The applicant has also added some additional detailing with some materials on the side of the building that will face Northwest 100th Street. And then additionally, there is a good amount of landscaping to be installed on the site. The stormwater management is proposed partially to be an underground system located in this area, as well as a surface dry detention area located here. This is on the private property, not within the right of way. But with that, then the applicant would not construct the typical 2-foot berm for the parking lot. So they are showing the plantings there in line with the trees in order to provide that typical headlight screening. There are some, like I said, additional trees being planted, as well as new sidewalk being installed along Hickman Court and some modifications to the Northwest 100th Street sidewalk to replace some panels and bring that into compliance with the ADA requirements. It'll also reconfigure the crossing. Right now, there's a crossing that goes across Northwest 100th Street, but it doesn't go to anything. So this would be reconfigured then to actually attach or point to the existing crossing that's on the north side of Hickman Court. There are some utility connections existing already, of course, for sanitary and water. So it's not exactly the same service lines that are being used for this. But it is generally the same connection locations that are going to be used for the water and sanitary that are in Hickman Court. And then we did talk a little bit about the general site circulation and flow with the last site, but generally we would expect most of the traffic to approach on the road back here, either from Hickman Court, or if you took the Swanson Boulevard entrance where it turns to Maddox Parkway, goes behind Casey's, you would enter in this location. You would enter the customer queue lane here and then proceed through the drive-through. And then you could either exit directly onto that backage road, or you could turn in to utilize the vacuum stations. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the site plan. There are no outstanding staff comments. They have addressed all of the concerns. And they are obviously here tonight if you guys have any questions. And we have not, we've had some general inquiries, but no negative public comment. And Planning and Zoning Commission did unanimously recommend approval.
Casey's hasn't objected.
Nope.
Eric? Yeah, any comments from neighboring business owners?
Nope, just a couple questions about what the proposal was, but no specific comments.
Any concerns from staff on traffic patterns flowing or events with Horizon or anything of that nature?
No, I don't anticipate a lot of conflict with that. You might have some of the Horizon customers also utilizing the car wash, hopefully on their way to an event, not after. But yeah, the site circulation would function appropriately.
Okay.
So is the only entrance off Hickman Court?
Technically, but not, because there is the entrance into Casey's right here that you'd be able to turn into, and I think still can get to that. And then there is the entrance off Maddox and Swanson location that is a
So help me
signalized.
understand why we couldn't use this similar layout on the third lot.
At the same time,
Right.
how do I shake off the last one when this thing fits here?
I
but the
mean,
other one
that
didn't
northwest
fit?
corner entrance is exactly what Shrikant and I were talking about.
Right.
They can certainly look into it, moving the other location entrance.
But as far as this particular site
I'm good
plan,
with
are
it.
there
I'm
any
good with it.
other
just trying to
questions?
understand,
If
yeah.
not, I entertain a motion to approve the site plan.
Approval of site plan for Silver Star Car Wash.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion pertaining to this? Being none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Sometimes Weaver's awake.
Sometimes.
Every now and then.
And that is coming. That passes by a vote of 4 yes and 1 abstention. Very good. Good luck. Next, Chief, you're up.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple weeks ago at the council meeting, we tabled and brought this forward again tonight on the TAPS liquor license. When I was before you tonight, like I said, that is a part of my job that I love. This is not a favorite part of my job. I don't enjoy this, but I think the code is very clear on what my responsibilities are. Clive City Code states that the chief will conduct an investigation and submit a written report as to the truth of the facts in an application for a liquor license. Iowa law and the ABD establish certain requirements for applicants to be granted a license to sell alcoholic beverages. One of those is the applicant has to have a good reputation, indicating that the applicant will comply with all laws and rules governing the license. Now, before the last council meeting, I provided 14 different documents that indicated that the applicant, Will Hildreth, is not the true owner of TAPS and that he has not been the true owner since the original application in 2019. In addition to those documents, I want to go over a few other things. Some of those documents that I provided as proof of certain things came from an ABD case investigation that the ABD provided to me. That was their case 21-10479, and it was case category false ownership. A number of those documents, as I said, came from that. The question came up last meeting, why ABD had not continued contacting them about this investigation. That report has an indication on the top. Supervisor has closed out this case due to the duration of time of completion exceeding the threshold. So apparently the ABD has a period of time that the investigator has to complete it. And for whatever reason, their investigative staff did not complete it in a timely fashion, and they closed it out. They didn't close it out because they found that it wasn't the case. They just administratively closed that out. I wish that wasn't the case, but that's the way it was. Another point I want to bring up, in November of 2021, Tim Hartman filed a report with the Clive Police Department regarding an ex-employee forging checks from TAPS Pub. In that report, he holds himself out to be the owner of TAPS and the victim of the crime. Nowhere in the 137 pages of that report is the name Will Hildreth ever mentioned at all. On July 22, prior to our last meeting, Tim Hartman was the one who came to see me at the Clive Police Department to talk about this, and not Will Hildreth. We spoke in an interview room, and that interview was video recorded. During the interview, I confronted Tim with my assertion that he had been lying to the city council for the last 4 years. His response was that he wasn't the one that had been lying, that it had been Will Hildreth that had lied to us. 3 days ago, I was contacted by the ABD, and they said that they and the Iowa Department of Revenue have concerns regarding the operation of TAPS. The Iowa Department of Revenue shared that there's significant tax liability, sales withholding, underreporting, and lack of Schedule Cs being filed, and concerns of misrepresentations. And that same information, they said that Will Hildreth has a number of outstanding tax liabilities with the state of Iowa. If you accept that Will Hildreth is the true owner of TAPS, then there's reason to believe that he is not complying with all laws and rules governing that license. Additionally, last time we didn't talk anything about Mr. Hildreth's criminal record. He has been arrested several times for OWI in 2011, for public intoxication in 2018, and again for public intoxication last year. He's listed as a defendant 22 times in Iowa courts online, mostly for traffic citations. My recommendation remains that the council not approve the liquor license renewal for WHR 101 LLC, doing business as TAPS, with Will Hildreth as the owner.
Thank you, Chief. Questions?
I don't know, I have a question right now, but just so the council knows that I have reviewed the whole council meeting I missed, watched this whole thing, so I'm up to speed as much as possible watching the video, and so I look forward to more dialogue.
Madam Council, do we need to bring this off the table?
My understanding is that you just continued, you continued the public hearing. I don't believe, I think the agenda covers it.
It was,
No,
we continued
before,
the item from the
you just
previous
continued
meeting.
it, you didn't table it.
It was
I
just
don't believe you
continued,
need
was
to move
not
this off
tabled?
the table.
Thank you.
The agenda covers it being procedurally in front of the council.
Thank you. Questions? Again, what we're being asked to do is to approve the renewal of the license. So
We hear from the applicant.
can.
Chief, real quick, sorry, I just wanted to ask. So there's been assertions of, Mr. Hartman's record, Mr. Hildreth's record. As far as the location itself, can you tell us, just remind us if there's been any service calls, any problems out there, anything like that?
Sure, I can confirm that as far as calls for service, for police service, that it has not been a problem bar for us. That is not part of my assertion. My assertion goes to the honesty of who the owner actually is. The bar itself is quiet and does not have overt demands on police services.
Thank you.
Okay.
We could hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. My name is Dave Helstern. I am with Sullivan & Ward in West Des Moines. I'm also on the Clive Chamber Board of Directors, so Clive is very near and dear to my heart. I'm here on behalf of my client, WRH 101 LLC, and it's owned entirely by Will Hildreth, and that entity completely owns TAPS Pub. It always has since 2019. The problem is my client and his manager are terrible with paperwork. They are not criminal masterminds by any means, as maybe they are portrayed by some of these filings. But what happened was Mr. Hartman, Tim Hartman, did try to buy it in 2019 from the old owner, Kyle Koth. Kyle Koth was just wanted out of it. And
Kyle
Tim
Koth or Kevin Koth?
Kevin Koth, sorry. Kevin Koth couldn't get, Tim could not get a liquor license. He applied for liquor license. It was denied. At that point, Mr. Hartman knew that he wasn't going to be able to buy the business. And Kevin still wanted out. And so at that point, Tim had to try to find somebody to buy it and hopefully keep him on as manager, which had been his position since 2016. So this is 2019. He asked my client, Will, and Will agrees. He says, yeah, I'll buy a bar. They'd been looking at bars. And so in 2019, he did buy the bar from Kevin and paid $40,000 and put some extra money into it. The problem was he started the paperwork right. He did not have counsel. He did not have an accountant helping him. He should have. He got the LLC lined up. He signed the lease. He signed it personally. He should have signed it under the LLC that he had just created. He got a tax ID number. He went and got the sales and withholding tax permit. He was on the right track. It's just then they didn't finish what they needed to. They didn't transfer the stuff over. They took the path of least resistance and they just kept doing things as it had always been done. And I agree, that was not the correct way to do things. But that's 2019. And now all of a sudden, when this renewal comes up, my clients get 2 days prior notice from the last meeting. So I believe your meeting was on June 22nd. On June 20th, they received notice from Chief Venema that he was going to recommend that a liquor license not be renewed. So the problem was my clients had no idea that this was coming. They had this renewed 2020, 2021, 2022. Now we're at 2023. And all of a sudden, there's all of these issues. I understand. They are taking all the steps that they can to fix everything that has been labeled as a problem. The alcoholic beverage division did come to them and all they did was ask for information. They provided all the information. My client, Will Hildreth, provided all the information and he clarified in 2021 that he was still owner. He's got an email from August 27th, 2021, where he emailed with somebody at her name's Ms. McNabb. And he clarified, no, I'm owner, because there was a note in the file that said he wasn't owner anymore. So he has still been the owner. He did not do things tax-wise correctly. He misunderstood that if he didn't take out more than he put in, that it would be called a disregarded entity. It would be not taxable. I understand, not smart. He's not an accountant. He's not an attorney. That was not the right thing to do. So
But ignorance isn't.
No, is no defense of the law. I understand. And I appreciate that. I'm just saying they didn't know it was a problem until 3 weeks ago. And they're taking every step they can to fix it right now. So they've made sure that anything that wasn't in WRH 101 LLC's name is now. They've revised anything they had to. Will Hildreth is the owner of the LLC, is the owner of the business. Tim Hartman is only a manager, only the general manager of the bar. So everything is getting cleared up. As Chief Venema said, the ABD's investigation, which you got pieces of, not the whole thing, but you got pieces of last meeting, they stopped the investigation due to time, but they didn't take any action to try to get rid of this license or say, hey, you're doing everything wrong, we're going to revoke your license. The Iowa Department of Revenue has known about these issues and has not taken any action against them. There's no tax liens, there's no court cases, there's nothing that's been done. And in the notices that were provided last meeting from the Iowa Department of Revenue, from talking with my client, Will, and his manager, I don't know that they ever received them because they were made out to Will Hildreth personally to the business address and it didn't include the suite number. So they said they didn't get them. I have to believe them. I have to believe my client. And they are trying to take care of it right now. They didn't learn about these letters from the Iowa Department of Revenue until your last meeting, 2 days before your last meeting. And so what I'm asking for is that at this point, allow them the time to fix these issues since they've just learned about them. It's now been 3 weeks and 2 days. In 3 weeks and 2 days, they've already moved almost everything, gotten everything fixed that has been labeled as an issue, except for the taxes. All of their taxes are going to have to be redone. 2019, 2020, 21, 2022, and now the withholdings and anything done this year. And they have an accountant, Julie Ike is her name. She's with Midwest CPAs, Mid-Iowa CPA. Yep, thank you. And so she is already on the case to revise all that and get it all done. So there will not be an issue, but if you deny the liquor license, they're going to have to appeal it. We're going to have to fight this out. It's going to cost them more money that they're already spending to fix all the issues. Or the business is going to close. You're going to lose a business that's been in business in Clive since 2010. That Tim Hartman has managed since 2016. And my client bought in 2019. I mean, we're talking, this isn't a new business. This is a business that's been around, and we would hate to see it get lost just because of these paperwork issues, even though I understand it is my client's, totally my client's fault. But they're taking every step they can. If the council was not willing to agree to just renew it for this year and make sure that everything's done for next year, at least do a conditional approval. The downtown city of Des Moines, you know, they put restrictions on liquor licenses, timelines, things like that. The Cord Avenue district was the prime example. And so I would ask that if the council wants to see faster progress and make sure that these are not an issue, conditionally approve it for now and allow us the time to actually fix these issues. Thank you.
So how much time are you thinking, or your clients thinking you're going to need?
I emailed Ms. Stenger today. I asked for 6 months. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think we'd be able to get it done in 6 months. It's going to be refiling all of these, the withholdings, the state and federal taxes, the everything. So 6 months is what I'm asking for.
Questions? Ted?
I'll speak up. Mr. Helstern, you paint a nice picture of your clients. You know, what I hear is a lot of excuses. Mail not being delivered, you know, an overly complicated setup that they've created for themselves. You know, in my mind, there's two options here. Either they were willfully obfuscating, which is where I'm leaning, or they're just completely incompetent. And not being good at paperwork is not an excuse. You know, I mean, if you're running a business, you gotta do paperwork. I mean, that's just common sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Neither one of them have run a bar and restaurant before. Well, Tim Hartman has run it, but he's not ever owned one. And so this issue, own this one. Well, he does not own this one. What I'm saying is they both, is the blind leading the blind here. And I'm not saying that's an excuse. It's just, they didn't complete what they needed to. They didn't move things over where they needed to. This was not willful. And for them to file some of this paperwork with some names and some other names, I mean.
But they've also misrepresented it in public. I mean, we've got a whole laundry list of evidence here. So, you know.
If I could.
Go ahead.
Mention, the public outlay was that my client, Will Hildreth, did not want to be known as the owner of Taps Pub. He just did not want this. He didn't want these calls. You're talking specifically about the Des Moines Register article. He didn't want to get a call from a reporter asking about what he thought as the owner of the bar. He didn't want friends to come in and say, hey, give me a free drink. Hey, any of these issues. He wanted to own it. He treat it as an investment and that he was going to make money off of it. And that was all.
Yeah, fair enough, but he's also misrepresented with the chief. And so, you know, we don't take this lightly. I mean, this is their livelihood and I get that. And we don't want to be, you know, capricious in our decision-making here. But you know, coming into this after the last meeting, I was fully prepared to, if they could do what we had asked, which they have, and to their credit, with the management agreement, to move this forward. The tax issues caused me additional pause, but I'm gonna credit my colleague Shrikant here in our conversation today and pointing out that everyone's innocent until proven guilty. And they're just allegations, and it's up to the state to make that decision, not up to us. And I fully agree with that point. So, you know, this is a really, for me, this has been one that I've grappled with, because I want to be thoughtful about it. I don't want to be unfair to these guys, but I do feel like they've been willfully obfuscating. So, you know, I guess where I stand on this is I'm willing to do a probationary period, whether that's 6 months or 3 months. I don't know what the time period is, to allow them to address this, fix this. But, you know, in my mind, this is it. This is like there's no more chances after this, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of where I stand on this.
Thanks, Ted. Legal counsel, what are our parameters as far as granting a
We're scrambling.
license?
We're
Wow,
scrambling.
thanks for the second time tonight. Appreciate you. I'll remember that. No, I was just looking up Iowa Code 12339, which talks about suspension and revocation. My understanding, and I know Dave, you and I are brilliant legal counsel. We can figure this out, given maybe a break, Your Honor. But other than that, my understanding is what City of Des Moines did was a suspension. Perhaps, but I'm not aware of a conditional approval of the license itself. So I'm sure we can get together and confirm or deny whether that's a permitted way forward. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, and ultimately, I think, you know, I'm kind of on board with what Ted was saying. If we can do something where it is conditional and there's a requirement to check in or you know, provide some sort of progress. And, you know, based on what you guys have done just in the last 3 weeks, I have great hope that you will continue that, right? And that this will be a lesson learned and we'll all move on, right? That being said, if we can't do the conditional approval or some sort of check-in or something like that, I would still be leaning toward, and I'm with Ted, I grappled with this back and forth. But, you know, until the state figures out what they want to do about whatever tax issue or non-tax issues there are, that's for the state to decide. But even if we do approve this for a 1-year renewal, if everything is not above board next year, there's no, like to Ted's point, there's no more chances. There's no more coming back and saying, oh, we missed that mail piece this time.
Oh, I totally understand. Oh,
Yeah, I obviously wrestle with this too. And look, I'm a pro-business kind of guy, right? I want to see people run a good establishment and you have employees and they have families. So I certainly understand that. I also appreciate that, there haven't been problems. Look, we've had plenty of problem bars here in Clive, and it speaks volumes that you're running a clean operation where you're not having issues with the police are going in there. On the other hand, look, when you're running a business, the paperwork is a critical aspect, right? And I think, for a couple of years, they let you guys slide on this, right? It wasn't a big deal. So you just kind of let it slide. Well, now is where the rubber's meeting the road right here. And as we look at this, some of the tax things, that's a state issue. That's not a City of Clive issue, right? The chief has made the assertion on good moral character, right? So, I'm still not exactly sure who owns the bar, right? Are we playing a shell game here, or do you actually own it? And I would agree with my colleagues that, we have some type of conditional release of this, but I also want to see a check-in at 3 months to see where we are. I think the chief's brought up some great points. I think the ABD has brought up some great points as well. And that brings a lot of concern, right? That makes us concerned with a lot of different things that we've already gone through here with some of the evidence that's been presented. So look, I don't want to see you guys close down on technicalities, but on the other hand, I want you guys to be upfront with not only the council, but with the chief right here. And, nobody likes to be toyed with. And I would look at something as some type of conditional at 6 months and then a 3-month check and to see where you are. Look, a couple weeks ago, we gave you guys, hey, look, we got to get this done. We're seeing progress, right? We're seeing movement in the right area, which is a good thing. We just need to continue to see that movement, right? And get on the right track right here. So I agree with my colleagues that maybe a 6-month conditional along with the 3-month check-in right there for a status update would be something that I'd be in favor of.
I guess the question I have procedurally, is it possible for us to move to other items on the agenda and then take a recess? Or do we need to take action?
Well, we do need to take some sort of action. I might recommend that you table, and then we can bring it off the table after you act on the other action items, Your Honor.
Very good.
Aren't we under some timing?
Table it for the night.
Table, we bring it off.
Oh, so when you said you needed time to talk to him, you meant tonight?
I need like 4 minutes. I think I have a solution, to be honest with you, if I could.
I would like to make my comment though, before you enter into that.
I hear the council's direction. I think I
Yeah.
have a solution.
And that is, I think you have actually made a compelling argument. And I thought last time it was compelling that there haven't been calls or complaints. I understand where the chief has to come from in asking the question about whether he's been lied to and whether that is the reason of moral character that would justify closing a business down. But what you have brought today reminds me that with the beverage commission not being the one coming in and, finalizing a report saying this is a problem and everything else is a little bit up in the air. Seems like a lot of technicalities to me that could be problematic in asking them to close down. So if it were to come to it, I would be in favor of going ahead and approving the license for the next year and seeing them treat this as an opportunity to get the business right-sized or, right on the right track more permanently. But one thing I brought up last time was at some point, I don't think they should be under a restriction. I think they should have the ability to work together. If Mr. Hartman should eventually become the legitimate owner and things have run well for several years, I'd like to see that be possible and this not be hanging over them for a decade, for example. So I did want to say that.
Susan, to your point, I think, and counsel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the code allows for reconsideration of anybody that's been convicted previously to be reconsidered after 5 years, I think.
It is.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, that is a way, that if Mr. Hartman is wanting to eventually buy the bar, that could potentially be an avenue. But, I will say the personal criminal records, they do give me pause too, right? And there is a, I'm sorry.
What do you mean by convicted? I'm sorry.
So the code section, it talks about, and I'm not a criminal lawyer, so I'm getting out of my depth very quickly here. But it allows somebody with a previous record to apply for a liquor license if their record has been clean for the past 5 years.
Okay. And a piece that you guys didn't get.
Well, if you're going to speak, you'll need to come up to the mic.
And a piece you guys did not get, when I was denied in 2009.
Identify yourself. for the
Timothy
record,
Hartman,
please.
sorry. I'm the manager at Task Pub. A piece that you guys didn't get is my entire legal convictions since 2019 was a total of 4 convictions that I have. That's all. I mean, 4 days, I'm sorry. I have, this is one day, this is one day, this is one day, this is one day, Matt, you want that in. Just, you guys didn't get that, I'm sorry. But my record is not as bad as you think, is what I'm saying. That is everything I've been convicted for since 2010. So.
And I can appreciate that, but this is a higher standard than just operating,
Yep.
a bodega or, I
Of
don't know,
course.
whatever.
Of course.
This is a liquor license. There's responsibilities that come with it.
Yep, and I've actually had a liquor license since then.
Okay.
Back in 2015, so.
And so, yeah, there's, public intox, there's some other issues here, and don't get me wrong, I hope that you can overcome these, and I'm with Susan. I would like to see you, if that's your eventual goal, and Mr. Hildreth is okay with that, I'd like to see you take over ownership at some point.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about past club or anything. I'm just talking a liquor license in general. I don't have too many convictions there is what I'm saying for the course of the past 13 years, so.
Okay, well, I hope you can keep that up.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, Mike.
I just have a couple comments. I did watch the last meeting. I have some concerns as well. And I think when I paused the video and replayed it 3 or 4 times. When you talked about your investment and all you wanted is a bar to have fun and come to and talk to the guys and gals and have a family and all that, that tells me you did let it be known that you were the bar owner, right? So I don't want to be a bar owner and I want to hide so nobody asks me drinks. That was out of the hat before. If you watched the last video, you said that's what you wanted, right? In the last video. So you might check with your client next time. Now, the other piece of that is you said you aren't making any money and that's not your goal. I've never heard of anyone buying an investment and saying, I don't care about making money. I think we're not getting all the truths here. It's my opinion. I think it's somewhere in the middle here. Saying that, should we move on? I would have been even more open to letting this happen if you would have came in and just owned it and said, this is what happened. This is what happened. We did this. We were new. This is how we wanted to structure it. We own it. Apologize. We're going to fix it. Was that some of it?
Well, I mean, that's perfectly fine. That's what we're trying to do is
Yeah.
fix it, having the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. So I do think there was some misleading going on in this whole thing. I agree with Susan. Should people and others, should someone be punished forever for it? Probably not, right? Second chances, third chances are okay. But moral character at this piece is important, especially with an alcohol beverage license. I've owned them before. I've had them before. I get it. I don't agree with some of the comments from before. I didn't have a chance last time to make some of these comments, but I don't agree with some of the comments that were made that you didn't know about the bank account. You couldn't write on the bank account. I've owned several restaurants and bars in my past. We have never, I could never have even thought of not having the partners being able to go get money or withdrawals or deposits or any of that. The banks made us do that, right? It was all of us signing. The banks made us sign personally on leases, not an LLC. We know the game, right? We don't let bar owners sign by LLCs because they're gone the next year. So probably it was forced to sign personally instead of the LLC. It wasn't a mistake. It was the lease person said, we have to have your personal guarantee here.
Well, he had a personal guarantee, but he also signed it personally.
That's
So,
right, but you
which
said
he
I
shouldn't
would have
have.
said not to. I know they don't allow that in bars and restaurants because of that. So I get that game. I understand it. I do think that the chief is right on what he's doing here. I think what I don't, and Chief and I have talked about this a lot. I don't like using numbers of 22 arrests. I want convictions, right? I don't like you're arrested because maybe 4 of them were convictions. But to use the whole rap sheet looks negative, right? But to use convictions is the real what happened. And so that's what I want to see in the future is convictions, not every time I was pulled over or every time a traffic stop or any of that stuff. So in fairness, I am stuck here too and wondering what to do. I guess this break will help.
So what I'm entertaining would be a motion to table, move through the rest of the agenda, to free up staff, and then we can take a recess after we get through those other items. If someone would like to move the table.
Second.
Motion to table, second. Are we prepared to take a vote on that, Matthew? Would the council please vote on the motion to table this for later in this meeting? And would council
Yes.
please vote, and then the clerk please post that vote.
I'm a yes, obviously.
Okay, well, we got five.
I'm having a,
You have an IT guy right next to you.
that keeps logging me out.
Okay, so that is tabled to later in the meeting. We'll move on to the next item. Richard.
I'm good.
Go.
Can you see?
We can.
Okay. Tonight, for your consideration, would be the next steps in the Lanham Park Improvements Project. So before we get to the recommended consultant team for your consideration tonight, I wanted to take a couple steps back and talk through what we are going to be asking this consultant team to do, because it's been a few months since we've been here. So the first part of this, and this is really the project that was the impetus for this, is to improve Linan Park. This is one that's been on the council's strategic plan and kind of top of the list for several years. So the main part of this will be taking this conceptual master plan that was completed as part of the 86th Street neighborhood project, refine that into a more detailed master plan. We'll then work to develop construction drawings for phase 1 improvements. That's most likely to include a new playground, a new shelter restroom building, and a spray ground for the park, essentially taking the main park elements and rebuilding them. One of the big challenges for this will be to the desire to get the park improvements off the ground, show improvement out there like the council's talked about quite a bit, but also make sure that we can reserve opportunities for future stormwater improvements within the park that helps to assist redevelopment within the larger neighborhood. The next part of this work that they'll be doing is a stormwater master plan for the sub-watersheds that you see kind of outlined in that bluish green color on there. They will be taking those sub-watersheds, identifying potential stormwater management solutions for Lanham Park, a redevelopment of the areas surrounding the park, Harbach Boulevard, and potential future development parcels. They will also evaluate for Lanham Park for use as a regional stormwater solution. Potentially one of the areas we're looking at is maybe underground storage under that open field right now. And then finally, find a way to maximize on-site storage solutions without sacrificing that usable park space. Next is looking at Harbach Boulevard phase 2 improvements. So as you know, the phase 1 improvements east of 82nd Street are just about wrapping up. Phase 2 will go from 82nd to 86th Street. We want to look at how the Lanham Park improvements as well as stormwater management could be handled through this phase of street reconstruction. One of the things we've looked at and talked about is possibly focusing on-street parking within the constraints and finding ways to use that for parking and stormwater management. So they'll be looking at that as well, and we'll end up with a preliminary design for that section of street. And the last major component of this is an 82nd Street trail connection concept. So one of the big things that was talked about in this neighborhood plan was finding a way to connect this neighborhood to the Greenbelt. It's one of the last remaining neighborhoods that doesn't have a safe Greenbelt connection. So how can we do that, and how could that be done? One of the concepts that was identified in the neighborhood master plan was potentially a trail through that paper right-of-way south of 82nd Street there. So they will look at that and maybe some other concepts on how we could develop a safe trail connection that we could look at then budgeting in the future. Now on to the proposal itself that we received. So we put out a request for proposals earlier this year, and we're very pleased that we got 9 interested consultant teams. So what I've done here is just list the 9 teams that we got. The primary is the name that's underlined, and then all their sub kind of consultants were on that in the parentheses there. And then I put the estimated cost for each one of the teams there at the very end of that. We had a wide range of teams, experiences, as well as costs that came along with their proposals. as we went through the selection process, we wanted to find a way to make sure we could find the best team to do this project. So we had a small team that was comprised of the city manager's office, leisure services, public works, community development. We reviewed all those proposals and we narrowed it down to 4 teams we felt were best suited to come in for an interview so we could learn a little bit more information. We were able to select those 4 teams to come in based on how well they interpreted the scope of services we provided to them, what were the best examples of similar projects that they had done in the past, and then the experience of their project manager. One of the things that we are really finding on the Little Walnut Creek project that we're working on is that a really experienced project manager makes the overall project that much better. And that's what we're seeing is a lot of success there with that. And so we really focused in on a lot of that. So when we brought them in for an interview, we asked them to prepare a presentation that focused on 3 different things. We asked them why and who they selected for their project manager for this project and what made them the best project manager for that, how they would approach stormwater management, what type of philosophy they would use and how they've done that in past projects. And then we asked them to go in a little bit more depth on the Harbach Boulevard and how they might consider stormwater management and meeting the city's ordinances as part of that. So they were given about 20 to 25 minutes to do that. Once they were done with that, we were able to ask them questions and have a dialogue about some of the things that we heard and additional questions that we had. Following that process, we went through and did background checks on all of the 4 finalists there. So we looked at their submitted example projects, what was the project manager's role in those projects, and then we did reference checks on that project manager. What was your experience from similar agencies and working with them? Were they able to work through all the issues that come up as part of a project? Were they able to keep it on a schedule? And ultimately, were you happy with the project that you got at the end of that? Not just through the design process, but then also too, if they had taken projects to the construction stage, and what was that experience of that city or that agency in doing that? At the end of that, we came to a conclusion that Smith Group was the team that we wanted to bring forward for consideration tonight. There are a few different reasons for that selection. We really felt like Smith Group had the best understanding of what it is we wanted to do out there. They really were able to dig deep into the scope of services, take a look at the site, and really came forward what we thought was the best understanding of our scope of services. They also, we felt, had the best project manager. Jay Blue is the project manager for this project, and he just has a wide variety of experience that really felt like it was unparalleled out of any of the other consultant teams. The reference checks that we did were outstanding. They said he managed difficult projects. He was able to keep them on schedule, moving forward in a timely manner, and was able to work with lots of different people and ideas to come up with the best solution. We are also very impressed with the depth and understanding on how we could look at Harbach Boulevard when we seek to rebuild that, maximizing a lot of things in a small space. And then finally, on those reference checks, they had the best types of projects that matched what Lynn Ann provides for us. They had done projects where they were rebuilding an existing park. They had worked with redevelopment surrounding parks. And so we really felt like that was the thing that pushed them over the edge on this, providing that opportunity to really have done the work that we're asking them to do here at Lynn Ann. So between all of those, we really felt like Smith Group was the best team. Also too, it is a different project manager than we have for Greenbelt Landing. So there isn't getting caught up in having too much workload on that. We also feel like based on what they talked about, that they'll have the time and the ability to do this in a timely manner like we've asked. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions or anything else you want me to expand on.
Any questions? Again, what we're being asked.
No, Rich, very comprehensive as far as both the selection process, the criteria, the scope of services that you and the team, I thought, did a really thorough job with this. I know it's a complicated project. Look, we've been talking about Lynn Ann for a long time, and I'd like to see it moving forward. So very pleased to congratulate the team on this very thorough process.
I had a question. I'd like to have you go back to the slide that showed the concept for Lynn Ann.
Yeah.
And this is the first I'd seen it because I don't think it was in the packet. So I was just trying to figure out, so as future phase development, those are the existing, what is that?
So yeah, maybe I'll just walk through that real quick. So the kind of bluish gray down here is the Harbach Center. The green is the existing mini pitch. This gray is the existing basketball court. This is the open field up here now. And the rest of this is kind of what would be proposed from a high level of new stuff. So rebuilding a playground here, a splash pad, and then restroom shelter building on this site as well. So kind of still keeping a lot of the focus area in that same kind of area that has the activity now, and still leaving this green open space here. And that's what we've talked about as the potential open space. But then that could become a regional stormwater solution underground there, but still preserves that. So when we're talking about kind of improvements out there, we want to make sure that whatever investment we do to show that we're rebuilding the park, future efforts for stormwater does not disturb any of that area or disturbs very little of it.
Councilmember Judkins, I think the other green areas or the areas to the west of the park or the other properties that the city owns, the future phase development is still privately owned property. And so this is actually a snapshot out of the 86th Street neighborhood, the page on the 86th Street neighborhood plan.
Okay.
So that,
Well, I was-
shows our land and what's
I
still
was
privately owned land.
especially interested because you said they really got what we wanted to do. I was trying to figure out what is that in the
Yeah.
red box?
So, yeah, so
on the
this
property that we thought might be for redevelopment. So what is that?
So that is just showing how potentially some sort of redevelopment could go there, a combination of housing and residential or in commercial. And then that north-south kind of grayish area is kind of what they propose at Festival Street. So that maybe parking for the housing or the commercial there, but then could be used for farmers markets or things like that. And then if you go deeper into the 86th Street neighbor plan, they show what that could be look like if that future phase development was entirely redeveloped in a similar manner to that, with a Festival Street coming all the way down to the south to Harbach and having additional redevelopment up there.
So would that mixed use, that kind of red area that Susan was just talking about, would that be part of this?
No, this is only the existing park footprint. So what is existing park today? So for basically from this line to the east over to then the apartments over here.
What I will say though is we're still going to be thinking conceptually about what's around it. So it's not the actual construction is the phase one improvements, that construction drawings are going to be developed. But as why we had such an extensive scope of services for this is how does the Harbach Center relate to it? How do those adjacent properties relate to it? It's still going to be a part of the work that this team is doing with staff and with the council. But in terms of like hard construction drawings, doing, bidding something out next winter to build improvements at Harbach, or excuse me, at Lenan Park, that's kind of in the park core, but it's still going to be thinking about all the bigger picture around it and kind of some of it, basically evolving what we've already started with the 86th Street neighborhood plan in terms of what the redevelopment could look like to the west of it. And also answering that big question that the council we've all been wrestling with is, does the Harbach Center stay or go? Ultimately for the long-term vision. There may be interim conditions, particularly when you look at the property that the city owns, is there's some interim conditions that happen there. In the 86th Street neighborhood plan, we kicked around, you have like a little food truck park there in an interim condition until it's ready to have the full redevelopment, which on here is, I think if I remember, is a multi-story residential mixed use that's wrapping the parking in the middle. And so this would be kind of like just a concept of an ultimate build out condition, but we're trying to see what the evolution is for everything around it with knowing that we want to do something for the park now in terms of reinvesting in that park, but not doing it in a way where we compromise the other opportunities around it.
And
hopefully that's a good summary.
I'll just add personally, like I don't think this is a secret. Like I'm a big proponent of mixed use. So I'd love to see that stay, like that continues to stay the plan. So.
That Smith Group needs to give us some money back because that brown dotted area for parking and the parade area, it's already being used for that, right?
Yeah.
You come in the hood on nights, that whole thing is parking.
And
Grass, they're just driving up there already. I mean,
yeah,
there's no parking. So.
Yeah.
Well, there's like a gravel. We still kept the little gravel.
Yeah. And we use it for when we have special events out there. Well, so it's kind of a multifunctional space right now. Yeah.
But I think it shows that concept could be further evolved to formalizing that. And if you're doing phase development to the south, you might not get all the properties to redevelop at once. Can you do that in segments, and work your way to the south?
Right. My only question is, when do we break ground?
Well, we first have to
I
approve this
understand, but I gotta
resolution.
keep having people tell me when to break ground so I can hold us to it.
Give me a little bit of time and I'll get you a more refined date here in a couple weeks after we
What's the
get going.
undefined date?
Huh?
What's the one that's not refined?
So I would say that we want to be under construction next year sometime.
So were you moving the
I
resolution?
did make that motion. Move the resolution.
And we, second, is there further discussion?
I have one
Ted?
question. 82nd, the trailhead or the trail extension, excuse me.
Yeah.
Did they speak to what their public outreach will be for those residents that's going to be impacted?
So they did not speak specifically to that, but one of the things that we put in the scope of service was when we put the RFP out was that we wanted to have some sort of engagement, not only with the public at large, but knowing that there are some significant property owners or like with Glacier and some of the other large property owners that they're going to need to have some dialogue as part of this and part of that project. So we asked them to make sure that they allocated some time and effort for that.
I would say that's a big piece.
That 82nd trail.
It's not going to happen without it.
Yeah.
Glacier is going to have to be a big part of the conversation for a lot of pieces of this. They are.
Right, but that's probably the easiest place to put it through because you're not dealing with 15, 20 homeowners.
Yeah.
Individual property owners, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Property owners. You put that on the east side or whatever of that street, it goes.
Yep.
Right? Okay, I already made the motion.
Yes.
And I made the second.
But one
But I was,
thing,
oh, there's more discussion. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Susan.
I just want to say that they have included Ask Studio and I regard them highly. And so that is a plus for me. So I think it's worth hearing that.
Good. Good to know.
So again, we were at the point of further discussion. Hearing none, would the council please vote on the resolution?
This is for Lanham Park to be built by December next year.
Phase
But-
one.
Yeah. And will clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of,
Yes, I got it.
You can't vote no.
he's anti-part. 5 to
Hates parks and
0.
hates
Very
kids.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard.
I promise.
Amanda, could you tell us about setting a public hearing?
Yes, good evening again. So at a previous meeting, I think it was the May 25th meeting, we discussed whether or not the council would like staff to prepare an amendment for modifying the rear yard setback to allow a little more flexibility for homeowners to add covered decks, sunrooms, other sorts of improvements like that. So generally, you all said, please bring us back a recommendation, and then if you like it, you'll set public hearing. So in the intervening time, staff has contacted multiple of our neighboring communities. We found that all of them except West Des Moines do consider a covered deck to have the same setback and be part of the primary structure. West Des Moines does allow a 20-foot covered deck setback compared to their typical 35-foot residential setback. The other communities, some of them have various setback allowances for decks that are different, but once it would be covered, then that would no longer qualify for that reduced setback. So what staff's recommending based on our neighboring property owners and the variance cases that we've seen come forward is that allowing up to 20 foot of the rear facade for detached single-family dwellings to be constructed at a 25-foot rear yard setback instead of our typical 35-foot rear yard setback. Again, that would allow for about 85% of the variance applications related to rear yard setback then would have just been permitted to take place with a building permit submittal and review by staff. So this doesn't take care of every single request that we receive, but it would go a long way. We don't typically get a lot of public engagement or concern with these rear setback requests. And we don't get a lot of complaints after the fact when those variances are granted. But as we discussed last time, the true intent of the variance is to handle the unique physical characteristics of a property. And if we are granting multiple of these a year, it's really not a variance anymore. It's a change to the code that's most appropriate to kind of level that playing field for all of the city's residents. So with that, staff does just want to reiterate that it would not only be applicable to covered decks. We are just suggesting the 25-foot setback for up to 20 feet for any sort of improvement to the primary structure. I did include in the packet a few aerial photos that have indicated the location and size of some of these various rear yard setbacks that are granted. So you can kind of see the impact it has on views for the neighboring property owners, proximity to the homes, and just generally kind of get a feel for the variety of these cases that the Board of Adjustment has considered and granted in the past. So with that, staff would welcome any feedback, and if council is supportive of this ordinance change, we would recommend setting public hearing.
Any questions? Ted?
I'll move the resolution setting the public hearing for August 10th. At 6
Second
p.m.
from McCoy. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will clerk please post the vote? Again, we're just setting the public hearing here for August the 10th. And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Madam Council, are you ready?
No, that was more than 4 minutes, but we are prepared to resume discussion on the item if we could move to pull that off the table.
I just entertain a motion to
Move to continue.
move to bring item 3 off the table.
Off the table.
Thank you.
Motion is second. Are we ready to vote? Would the council please vote? And clerk posts that vote, so that item receives. I was having a little nap. So it is by 5-0 vote, it is now able to be considered again. So Madam Council.
Okay, I'll do my best to summarize. The action that's before you tonight is to approve a renewal of the Class C alcohol license by Taps Pub. The recommendation from staff was to not approve that. What I heard from council's discussion is you would like to provide the applicant some sort of like probational period or a conditional period to address the issues that were raised in the proceedings, such as the misrepresentations or the good moral character, as well as the financial underpinnings of the operation. So with that in mind, unfortunately, Iowa code does require you to either approve or deny the renewal process. So you do have only two choices there. What I hear the council wanting to do, I would recommend you approve the license renewal application, but then we take a second step. And what that would be like a revocation notice. So Iowa Code 12339 allows local authority, the city, to essentially put them on probation. You put them on notice that their license will be suspended or revoked after a hearing. And you could set the hearing for 3 months from now. And essentially they've got 3 months. They've been put on notice of concerns regarding the liquor license, and 12339 subsection 2B.
Or not to be.
Excuse me, 1B
The question.
lays out the grounds for those reasons that you could, as a local authority, suspend or revoke the license. And so the recommendation, I guess I have based on what I heard from you, is to approve the liquor license for the 1 year, but then immediately provide notice of a suspension hearing or concerns of suspension and revocation under 12339, and then set that hearing for 3 months from now or 6 months from now, whatever the council deems appropriate to evaluate the basis for that suspension or revocation. Does that make sense?
Okay, questions for legal counsel. And what we're looking for is a motion to approve the liquor license. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. And this would be for a full year. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
So I am confused as usual. So are we going to be then ready for
The second thing
What I would
Immediately
actually
tonight?
immediately, I
Yes.
would tell you that actually I don't need council resolution. I just need council direction on the second action. And that is handled internally administratively with your staff.
But that's a separate action. We're just voting on the,
Right now, it's whether to approve or deny the renewal application for 1 year.
okay.
And I will add, I did speak with the applicant's legal counsel, who agrees with the recommendation based on what we heard from council, and the chief as well. So if that's the direction of the council, you would want to vote to approve the renewal and give us direction.
So if everyone is voting, please, that vote passes by a vote of 5-0 to renew the license for 1 year. Now we take up the issue of whether or not there's a desire on the council to set a suspension hearing some date in the future, 3 months, to make sure that they're complying with everything we expect from them.
Yeah, I think 3 months is reasonable. We talked about that before. I think that's reasonable, at least a gut check period. We can see where they stand to make sure that we're making progress towards getting some resolution with this.
Let me ask the question though, if we have the suspension hearing and it's 3 months and they say, okay, yeah, we've done X, Y, Z, but we haven't done, or we've done X and Y, but we haven't done Z because we're still working with the department, the accountant, whatever.
I thought I heard their counsel say 6 months would
Right.
be
But
valid
can we do another
term.
hearing based on that? Or is this like a one shot where we got to do the hearing and then make a decision that affects the rest of the, time?
The answer is section 12339 provides you a lot of flexibility of what to do with that after the suspension hearing occurs. You can implement a suspension, you can reset a hearing, you can revoke the license, you can do nothing. You have a lot of flexibility and there is no time restrictions under 39.
So I think in that case, I'd agree with Eric. If we do like a 3 month, we can at least do a check-in.
And if we need to do an extension on that, Shrikant, then we could do another 3 months after that, giving them that 6 month window. But if we're just hanging out at 6 months, that's a lot of time. I'd like to have it more structured with a timeline to make sure we're moving forward on this.
So is that a motion for 3 months?
That's a motion.
And that's a second from you?
And Your Honor, I appreciate that you've formalized this into a motion and action item. I think I just need direction from the council. Do you want to vote? You're not, we'll take a vote, Your Honor. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Professor is.
That's right. No, Your Honor, yes.
So we do have a motion and a second
Do have a
already,
motion and a
so
second.
I think we should vote. Would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
To clarify, this is for the 3 month.
3 months.
Correct.
Can I ask one clarifying question?
Yes.
Who presides over this hearing? Is it the mayor or is it
Pro
all of
tem.
us or?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem. Hopefully not for their,
How about I provide you a fulsome memo following?
that'd be great. Thank you.
The council
Yeah, that'd be
meeting.
great.
Great.
And I think we're waiting for someone to vote.
Sleep at the wheel again.
And then we can post that vote.
Oh, now it's on, yeah.
And that passes by a vote of 5-0 to come with a hearing in 3 months. Is that clear enough direction?
I believe so, Your Honor. And if the council would like to provide the applicants with, I think they heard today what you're looking for in that hearing. My understanding is there were threefold items. One, good moral character improvement, or I guess validation of their moral character. Number two, financial wherewithal, including the taxes issue. And three, clarification of ownership and documentation. Was there anything further you wanted them to look at?
Okay. Taxes are back taxes, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Well,
Taxes?
I think that that's an unknown. Again, the
Sales tax and all that.
I would just suggest that maybe you provide direction that you need clarification on what that issue was or the concern was. Council indicated that they were working through that with their CPA. Whether the taxes have been paid or paid by the wrong entity, I think is an unknown question.
Okay, that's fine.
Council, if I could add, in the discussion, there was also just the underlying point of continued to have no police calls, no problems.
Well, and we did discuss this in the hallway that some of the things that they can and cannot control. I mean, if it comes up, it'll be in front of the council for consideration. My understanding is that the council wants to take a look at this for 3 months and they will evaluate the whole at that time. So whatever happens between now and then, they'll have a chance to review that.
And I would just too, in 3 months, we're going to talk to the chief and he'll give us an update if there's been any calls with that, if there's been any issues as well. So we will revisit that.
All right,
With that, I have the direction I need. Thank you.
very good. Pete, reports.
Utility bills went out in July, the beginning of the month. On the back is the explanation of what you see on your bill, including the new structure for residential stormwater and commercial and residential irrigation. Thus far, July typically is a busy month because we always have rate changes and people see new numbers on their bill. But thus far, our residents have seemed to have keeping up with the changes that were made. We've had folks asking for clarification on how their bills were calculated. But I've only had 3 cases to work with residents who are concerned that they're in the wrong stormwater tier or think they could move to a different one so far. We're not out of the woods. Irrigation is going to, if we have real warm weather, the first full month of irrigation charges will start to show up on that August bill. That's typically, even without these changes, the month when people start making tough choices about whether they turn it off or they keep going all in. We'll continue to work with them and make sure they have the information so they can make informed decisions about how they want to spend their dollars for turf irrigation and other utilities. But thus far, steady. And I want to compliment my colleagues in the utility billing department and Liz's team, especially because they've done a lot of work to get us to this point. We've got 12 months still ahead of us to keep refining and improving our roster, correcting things that needed correction, but we've got a really, really good step down the path right now.
Anything else, Pete?
No, sir.
I have a quick question. Are we prepared once those bills hit, which is probably going to be a surprise to people? You can't really tell from the chart what your impact is going to be, and then all of a sudden they'll see it. Are we prepared to help people have a conversation about how they can reduce that in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We always
Okay.
watch for high consumption on the irrigation side.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite parts of this project thus far is we've got a better understanding of the types of cases that are coming up. And now processes in place that we're building, some already there, that are helping us take that time frame from when a case is identified and to when it's resolved and shrinking that time so that we don't have multiple months of bills that either are still in question or being estimated. There are a lot of things in this that are out of our control. When we get a bad read and one of our units is broken and we need to go out and fix it. But we're doing a good job identifying the types of cases and coming up with plans that so we can address them.
Very good. Srikant.
Real quick on DART, some of you may have already seen this, but there was a new CEO selected, Amanda, and I always forget how to pronounce the last name. I've heard it. Wanke. Thank you. So she's officially going to start on September 5th, but she has already said, she's going to spend some time ahead of time getting up to speed and, doing some of the routes, volunteering at the state fair. So I think we're in a pretty good position with her personally. And
She's internal. I mean,
yeah,
sort of.
Yeah. I mean, so
She has years
technically,
of experience.
yeah, so she was with DART for quite a while as the external affairs lead, then also as the deputy CEO, and then as the chief operating officer. So she's got a long history with DART. She went to a bus manufacturer, New Flyer, I believe, which may actually work in our benefit with some of the challenges that we're talking about with, needing to replace equipment and some of those other facility related challenges as well. So yeah, she is internal with maybe a small asterisk.
Right.
She's a great choice. Yeah. So yeah, and she interviewed very strongly. She obviously knows the organization and knows what we're dealing with. There is one thing that was mentioned during the last commission meeting about construction kind of delaying some of the routes and the on time statistics. So I'm not doing good with last names, but Brandon from DART is going to be reaching out to each of the city leads, probably Matthew or Peter or Matt. You'll be getting a call sometime soon.
Smiley.
Yeah, that's it. Brandon Smiley.
COO.
Yep. So he's going to be reaching out just to kind of remind all of the city staff and just kind of say, hey, we'd like to know when you're doing construction so we can kind of try to plan around it as much as possible or take that into account. There was talk about Ingersoll, right? Like that's been shut down for a while, and a lot of that was kind of the extent of it was unexpected, I think. And so that was an example that was brought up during the commission meeting about, we want to try to avoid that and know about that ahead of time so they can try to, as much as possible, plan around it. The last update that I'll provide is on the facilities grant that DART went after. I think I mentioned last time that it wasn't, we weren't approved for that. We didn't receive that grant. Sherry and staff, they did talk with the FTA HQ lead that they liaise with, as well as the KC admin, just to find out what exactly happened. And essentially, it sounds like it came down to there was just too many requests, right? So they had $1.7 billion earmarked for this, and they received over $8 billion in requests. And they did say that our application was one of the best. It had 5 out of the 6 key factors required. The only thing they provided as far as specifics on improvement areas is we could have focused a little more on security for the facility, enhancing security. And then also this was more of just kind of a overall discussion point rather than something specific to our proposal or our request, I mean. But they did mention that electric buses, proposals that asked for funding for electric buses got approved at an outsized rate compared to like facilities improvements and facility requests. Iowa City did get approved on some amount for their request. And so Sherry and some of the staff, I think, is going to talk more specifically with the Iowa City team to find out where the differences were and maybe what kind of tipped them over the edge compared to our requests. That's it for tonight.
Good.
Okay, like many of you, I attended the Circasina Park groundbreaking. It was a really nice ceremony, great turnout of residents. Richard and team did a really nice job with getting that set up. Great to see our former mayor. He was his normal loquacious self in his speech.
Third word.
Ring the bell.
I got it.
So, but yeah, no, it was a nice ceremony, and I think that's going to be a great part. That's it.
Thank you, Ted. Eric.
Yeah, a couple quick things. Councilman Judkins and I attended the opening of LE Mental. It's great to see more behavioral health type of mental health services here in Clive. It's a huge need, and we're glad to see that we have some business that's addressing those. Also, you're going to hear more and more about RAGBRAI coming in with Catch Des Moines. You're starting to see some information come out on that as they finalize the route in here. So you'll be seeing more on that. And then I will also be gone for the next 2 weeks too, out of state. So give you a heads up on that.
Enjoy. Thank you, Susan.
I attended the Polk Grow Solar update, and it prompted me to look into what our restrictions are in the Country Club Neighborhood Association. And we do restrict any visibility of panels from the street. So it kind of does put some properties at disadvantage. And one thing that was mentioned by an organizer there was a city can consider having some solar regulations that would impact that. And I just like to have that for consideration for the future for the city to think about, because one of the things they mentioned is with more people moving toward electric vehicles, having a solar panel can be a way to offset some of that increased electric cost, which was appealing to me to hear that. And so I think it could be good for our city to think about providing for all residents.
And the financials on that are they're skewing more towards making it affordable for more homeowners. It's still a sizable investment, but when you think about the rate increases that are potentially coming versus the cost reductions that they've seen in the solar panels, it would make sense that we want to allow more of that, even if you happen to be on the north side of a street and you have a south facing house. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to put panels on with that current restriction.
Interestingly, we did get an inquiry from the Des Moines Register on these topics that I responded to today with information about our current policies about renewable energy systems, including rooftop solar. We'll see what comes of that story. I'm not sure what the angle is that they're pursuing.
Anything else, Susan?
No, thanks.
Michael?
I'll let you know what I'll be doing tomorrow, and I'll be looking up 4 words from Ted Weaver tonight. If my dictionary allows me to find those, that'd be great. I yesterday attended the mayor's, the MyLog with Mayor Edwards at Central Iowa Shelter and Services. It was a eye-opening. It was a really great event. Well attended, I think. What was really fascinating is what they're doing behind the scenes. So they're doing a great job getting beds and all that for people, but just the workforce piece of it. And then their greenhouse, we were served most of our dinner from what they grew there in the inside greenhouse, tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, different kinds of lettuce. They sell their lettuce to dozens of restaurants and all that, and it's a work program. And so really interesting to see what's really behind those walls and kind of the story of their growth. And I haven't seen that for a long time. So it is promising, I think, of what we heard. A lot of positive stuff coming out of it.
Councilmember, I would add to that, the CISS requested a letter of support from the mayor for grant funds that they're seeking from the state to continue a lot of those programs and do more outreach. One thing that they've done here in Clive is, and other suburban communities, is reach out to law enforcement to help with mapping where we may be seeing some homelessness, and how can they come out and help support that. And so we've drafted a support letter for that, as City of Clive has been a financial supporter of them, one of the few suburban communities for over 2 decades now. So wanted to throw that in there and add on to your comments.
They brought up the chief, I'm sorry, they brought up the chief in Clive's PD specifically, along with some others, about mental health and some of the things they were working together with. So it was all positive about us.
And sorry to interrupt.
No.
I think it's valuable to know from a Polk County Homeless Coordinating Council standpoint, one of the differences between that Central Iowa shelter and some of the other shelters is, while they don't allow drug usage on the premises, they don't require that people have to be clean while they're living there. And that is a good step in helping to get people off the streets, because there are some who just will not go into other shelters. And from what Leisha DeSmet, who has run the Central Iowa Wise, up until now, she's moving to Colorado, but she has said that they have a waiting list of about 120 that would justify building another shelter. So it's interesting to hear about the grant request, but I don't know if they talked about that, but I see that as a really valuable part of addressing some of the homeless issues in the county.
Well, and they're also working to keep people from being homeless with housing assistance. And that was a big issue. You may have heard that the governor turned back millions of dollars, which could have been spent.
Mayor County made a
Surprisingly.
Yeah. Very strong comment about that. So, but that is all I have. I'll let you all know what those words are.
Anything from the legal side?
Not having anything else tonight.
Okay, very good. Matt.
The only thing I have, Your Honor, is just the mayor and I will be next Tuesday attending a lunch and learn by the Food Bank of Iowa. So considering all the discussions that have been happening related to, I think they invited pretty much all the mayors and managers from the metro communities for a lunch and learn down at their facility downtown. And we will be attending that on Tuesday, and we'll report back. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Very brief. Thank you. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss this evening?
Any superlatives about the Clive Festival?
What was the fourth word? I didn't get the fourth word.
Loquacious.
That's an easy word. Come on.
On that note, I think we'll adjourn at 8:39. Thank you all.